In 1943, the Allies were trying to gain ground in Europe during World War II. They had already pushed their way up through Italy, but it was slow going. The Germans had built strong defenses called the Gustav Line, making it hard to advance. The Allies needed a new plan to outsmart these defenses and enter Rome, Italy's capital. This is where the invasion of Anzio comes in. The main players in this story were the Allies, made up of countries like the United States and the United Kingdom. A top American general named John Lucas was in charge of the operation at Anzio. On the other side, the German forces were led by a smart and experienced commander named Field Marshal Albert Kesselring. The plan was pretty straightforward. On January 22, 1944, Allied forces would land on the beaches near the town of Anzio, which is just south of Rome. By landing here, they could sneak around the strong German defenses and hopefully catch them by surprise. Over 100,000 troops were involved, using landing crafts to reach the shore. Once they made it onto the beach, they brought along tanks and other vehicles to help move the mission forward. The technical side of things involved a lot of planning and equipment. The troops used amphibious landing crafts for the shore attack. These boats could move in shallow waters and carry both soldiers and their gear. The soldiers carried weapons like rifles and small artillery. They even had tanks to help out once they landed. But it was not just about the stuff they had. It was about how they used it. Quick, unexpected moves were key to keeping the Germans guessing. However, things did not go exactly as planned. One major problem was that General Lucas chose to keep the forces close to the beach, instead of daring to push inland. This gave the Germans time to send reinforcements and fortify their defenses. Harsh winter weather and the tough terrain also made it more difficult for the troops to move quickly. As a result, the invasion did not manage to end the war in Italy quickly. The Germans put up a tough fight, leading to a long and drawn-out battle. It took months and many lives before the Allies finally broke through and moved toward Rome. Even though the mission did not unfold perfectly, it still matters today because it shows the lengths to which the Allies went to break through enemy lines. It highlights the challenges of war, like quick decision-making and handling the unexpected. Plus, it shows how important teamwork and strategy are, things that are still important in both big and small challenges today. In January 1944, the Allies were in a tough spot during World War II. The Germans were holding strong in Italy, and progress was slow. The Allies needed a new plan to break through the German lines and gain the upper hand. This led to Operation Shingle, a bold plan to land forces behind enemy lines at Anzio, a coastal town near Rome. The main people involved in Operation Shingle included General John Lucas from the United States, who was in charge of leading the troops. The British were also a big part of this effort, with forces under General Harold Alexander overseeing the entire move in Italy. The plan was simple in theory: land thousands of troops at Anzio and catch the Germans off guard, while the main forces continued to push from the south. On January 22, 1944, the operation kicked off. Early in the morning, United States and United Kingdom troops, along with Canadian and French soldiers, sailed to Anzio. More than 40,000 soldiers landed on the beaches while supported by heavy fire from warships. The idea was to move quickly and capture the key roads leading to Rome before the Germans could react. The troops used landing crafts, basically flat boats designed to drop soldiers right on the beaches. Tanks and vehicles rolled off these crafts onto the sand. Artillery, like the 155mm guns, were set up to clear any threats. Coordination was key for success. Yet, things did not go smoothly. The main problem was hesitancy. General Lucas decided to dig in and strengthen their defenses instead of advancing fast toward Rome. This pause allowed the Germans to regroup and reinforce their positions. Soon, the Germans launched fierce counterattacks. The flat terrain around Anzio, filled with marshes and open fields, made movement hard and increased the danger from artillery and snipers. Despite the challenges, the landing at Anzio opened another front that forced the Germans to stretch their defenses. It took months of tough fighting, but this operation helped the Allies eventually break through the German lines in Italy. Why does this matter today? The Battle of Anzio teaches us about the importance of decision-making in tough situations. The plan was daring, and while it did not go perfectly, the lessons learned influenced future military strategies. Understanding these events helps us appreciate the decisions and sacrifices made during a pivotal time in history. Plus, knowing about it reminds us how teamwork among nations can make a difference in the face of adversity. In the early months of 1944, the situation in Italy during World War II was tough for the Allies. After the successful landings in Sicily in 1943, they were aiming to push north through Italy. But the Germans had set up strong defenses, and progress was slow. One of the key places in this struggle was Anzio, a coastal town near Rome. The Allies planned a surprise landing here to break the deadlock, hoping to bypass the German defenses. The main players in this part of the war were the Allies, mainly forces from the United States and the United Kingdom, and the Germans who were defending Italy. For the Allies, General John Lucas led the troops that landed at Anzio. On the German side, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring was in charge of the defense. On January 22, 1944, the Allies landed at Anzio. At first, there was little resistance, and they quickly took the beach. The idea was to move fast and surprise the Germans, but General Lucas, being cautious, didn't push forward quickly, fearing a strong counterattack. Because of this delay, the Germans had time to strengthen their defenses, and soon the fighting got intense. The war at Anzio was not just about soldiers on the ground. Artillery played a key role. Huge guns, some firing shells of 88 millimeters or more, bombarded both sides. Tanks also supported the infantry, the foot soldiers, but much of the fighting was a grueling standstill in muddy, wet conditions. One of the big problems was the weather. Winter had set in, and rain turned the battlefield into a swampy mess. Soldiers lived in trenches, constantly wet and cold, which was terrible for morale. Supplies, like food and ammunition, had to be brought in while facing shelling from German guns. The result of this struggle at Anzio was a long and exhausting stalemate. This means neither side could gain a clear advantage for weeks. The fighting went on for months, with heavy casualties. Eventually, in May 1944, the Allies broke through. They linked up with other Allied forces and went on to liberate Rome. Why does this matter today? The Battle of Anzio showed the difficulty of war decision-making and the price of caution versus risk. It's a reminder of the hardships faced by soldiers and the importance of strategy. The battle was a lesson learned by the Allies in how to better coordinate their military operations. It also played a crucial part in the liberation of Italy, which was an important step towards victory in Europe during World War II. Understanding these moments helps us remember the impact of strategic decisions in military history. In 1944, the Allies were in a tough spot during World War II. They wanted to break through to Rome, Italy, but were stuck getting past German defenses. So, they came up with a risky plan to land troops by sea at a place called Anzio, which is not too far from Rome. This operation started on January 22, 1944. The Allies hoped to surprise the Germans, but things did not go exactly as planned. One of the main people involved was Major General John P. Lucas from the United States Army. He led the troops who landed at Anzio. On the German side, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring was the one trying to stop them. While Lucas wanted to move quickly to capture key roads to Rome, he ended up being cautious. His troops dug in instead of pushing forward aggressively. This gave the Germans time to set up strong defenses. Everyday life in the trenches was tough. Soldiers lived in muddy, cramped spaces and often had to deal with freezing winter rains. Supplies like food and ammunition were sometimes hard to get because German artillery was always a threat. Artillery are big guns that shoot explosive shells over long distances. The Germans had lots of these powerful 88mm guns, which made every day dangerous. The soldiers also had to cope with the noise and stress of constant shelling and attacks. They had to be on alert all the time. Small tasks, like making a meal or getting some rest, turned into big challenges. Despite this, they found ways to keep going. They wrote letters home, joked with each other to keep their spirits up, and made friendships that mattered a lot. But it was not easy. The Germans launched attacks almost every day to push the Allies back. The fighting got really intense around a place called the Cisterna. The Allies knew they had to stay strong and work together to survive and try to win. After months of fighting and no clear winner in sight, new plans were made. On May 23, 1944, a big offensive operation finally pushed through. This eventually led the Allies past the German lines, and they took over Rome on June 4, 1944, before D-Day happened in France. The Battle of Anzio taught us about the importance of strategy and working together under pressure. It reminds us of the courage people showed in really hard situations. Today, we can learn about perseverance and teamwork through their stories, appreciating the sacrifices made to change the course of history during World War II. In early 1944, the situation in Italy was pretty tense. For months, Allied forces had been stuck fighting against strong German defenses. The goal was to capture Rome and push the Axis powers out of Italy, but the Germans were holding their ground. It was like a big, frustrating chess game with real lives at stake. The stage was set for something to change. Notable figures were involved, like General Mark Clark of the United States Fifth Army and General Harold Alexander of the United Kingdom's Eighth Army. Both were leading the charge for the Allies, trying to break this stalemate. On the German side, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring was doing his best to stop them. So, what actually happened at Anzio? It all started on January 22, 1944, when the Allies launched an amphibious landing at Anzio, a coastal town in Italy. They hoped to surprise the Germans and quickly take Rome. The landing was successful at first, with tens of thousands of American and British troops, along with their allies, arriving on the beaches. They had tanks, artillery, and other heavy equipment with them. But things didn't go as planned. Instead of pushing inland immediately, Allied forces waited, which gave the Germans time to regroup. This led to fierce fighting and a real struggle for several months. One of the main challenges was the geography of the area. The flat plains of Anzio made it hard to move without being seen. This was a big problem because the Germans were able to shell the Allied positions with heavy artillery from the nearby hills. How did they finally break through? In late May 1944, after many attempts, the Allies launched Operation Diadem. This was a big push involving thousands of soldiers and all kinds of equipment, from tanks to planes. They attacked the German lines with everything they had. It took a few days of intense fighting, but eventually the German defenses crumbled, and the road to Rome was open. The results of this breakthrough were significant. On June 4, 1944, Allied forces marched into Rome. It was a huge morale boost for the troops and the folks back home. More importantly, it signaled the start of the liberation of Western Europe from Axis control. This was just 2 days before the D-Day landings in Normandy, another critical moment in World War II. Why should we care about the Battle of Anzio today? It's a great example of how persistence, teamwork, and strategy can turn a tough situation around. The soldiers who fought here showed incredible bravery and resilience under pressure. Their efforts remind us that even when things seem stuck or difficult, there's always a way to break through if you keep pushing forward. In early 1944, the Allies were knee-deep in the chaos of World War II. Things were tough in Italy. The Germans held strong defensive lines that blocked the Allies' path to Rome. Something had to change, so the Allies decided on a risky plan called Operation Shingle. The idea was to land at Anzio, a coastal town, and surprise the enemy. This could allow the Allies to outflank the German defenses and speed up the capture of Rome. The main players in this plan were the British and American forces. American General John P. Lucas led the 6th United States Corps, while the Germans were commanded by Field Marshal Albert Kesselring. Their decisions would be key to what happened next. On January 22, 1944, the Allies successfully landed at Anzio. It was quite a shock to the Germans. However, instead of pushing further inland quickly, General Lucas stayed close to the coast to build up his forces. This caution allowed the Germans to regroup and bring in more troops. In the following weeks, a brutal struggle unfolded. Soldiers fought in harsh conditions. Mud, rain, and winter cold made life miserable. Both sides dug trenches and set up artillery to hammer away at each other. Guns, tanks, and bombers were used all day and night in a deadly dance of attack and counterattack. The Allies had high hopes for Operation Shingle, but things got complicated. Their plan to move quickly got stuck in the mud, literally and figuratively. As time dragged on, it turned into a bloody stalemate. The Germans used their 88mm guns, known for their accuracy and power, to great effect against Allied armor and infantry. Meanwhile, the Allies countered with their own heavy artillery and air support. The battlefield, though strategic, became a grisly test of endurance. One of the major problems was logistics. Getting enough supplies to the soldiers was a huge challenge, as well as maintaining morale among troops who were stuck in cold, wet, miserable conditions. It was clear that breaking through would cost a heavy toll in lives. Both sides suffered numerous casualties, and the once promising plan felt like a trap. Eventually, after months of grinding combat, the Allies launched a final offensive in May 1944, breaking out of the Anzio beachhead. This led to the liberation of Rome on June 4, 1944. The victory at Anzio was bittersweet. Thousands of soldiers were lost and many more wounded. The mission had taken far longer and cost much more than planned. The Battle of Anzio remains important today because it shows how war strategies can change rapidly and have unexpected outcomes. It reminds us of the bravery and sacrifice involved in war and the high price of conflict. Understanding these events helps us learn lessons and hopefully prevent similar tragedies in our future. In 1943, the Allies were in a tough spot during World War II. They were fighting against strong German defenses in Italy. Everyone hoped for a breakthrough that could help them push the Germans back. That's where the Battle of Anzio comes into the picture. The main idea was to land troops behind German lines on the Italian coast, near a town called Anzio. This could surprise the Germans and help the Allies move forward. The plan was bold but risky. Key people involved included British General Harold Alexander, who was in charge of the operation, and American Major General John Lucas, who led the landing forces. On January 22, 1944, the Allies launched the attack. American and British troops landed on the beaches of Anzio. The landing caught the Germans by surprise, and there was little resistance at first. It seemed like the plan might work. But then things slowed down. Major General John Lucas decided to dig in and wait for reinforcements instead of pushing forward. This gave the Germans time to regroup and bring in more troops. The battle turned into a long and tough fight. The Allies faced many problems. There was rough terrain that made it hard to move quickly. The weather was often rainy and cold, making life miserable for the troops. The Germans launched fierce counterattacks, using heavy artillery and tanks. They had strong defenses that the Allies found very hard to break through. One of the biggest challenges was keeping the troops supplied with food, ammunition, and other essentials. After months of intense fighting, the Allies finally made progress. On May 23, 1944, they launched a major attack that broke the German defenses. The Allies were able to link up with other forces coming from the south, and together they pushed towards Rome. By June 4, 1944, Rome was in Allied hands. The Battle of Anzio taught important lessons. It showed how planning and leadership decisions could greatly impact a battle's outcome. The delay in advancing led to more casualties and made the battle longer than expected. It highlighted the importance of acting quickly to take advantage of a surprise attack. Why does this matter today? Anzio reminds us of the complexity of warfare and the bravery required from those involved. It also shows the importance of learning from mistakes to improve future operations. By understanding these lessons, military planners try to make better decisions and avoid similar problems. The battle's legacy lives on as a reminder of the costs of war and the need for effective strategy and leadership.